The night was thick with an inky darkness swallowing the world as I gripped the wheel of my car. The headlights cut through the black void like feeble beacons, revealing the desolate road ahead. The rain, fat and heavy, drummed relentlessly on the roof, creating an eerie cacophony that echoed the disquiet within. I had embarked on this night drive impulsively, seeking solace in the rhythmic hum of the engine and the soothing patter of raindrops. The GPS, my only guide, projected a single road ahead, a thin line meandering through dense woods. As I delved deeper into the forest, the signal on my phone dwindled to nothing, leaving me alone with the glow of the dashboard lights. The road stretched endlessly, each bend revealing more of the impenetrable darkness beyond. A subtle unease crept into the car, wrapping around me like an unseen fog. The isolation felt tangible, the trees closing in with an ominous watchfulness. Despite my attempts to shake off the disquiet, the sensation that something lurked just beyond my sight persisted. The rain intensified, obscuring the world outside. The wipers, working tirelessly, only smeared the water, creating a distorted view of the twisted trees that clawed at the sides of my car. The GPS voice, a robotic companion, continued to guide me through the labyrinth of rural roads, instructing turns that seemed to lead me deeper into the abyss. A flicker in the rearview mirror caught my attention, a momentary glint of eyes reflecting the glow of my brake lights. I swallowed hard, hands tightening on the wheel. The road behind me was empty, yet the feeling of being watched lingered. I dismissed it as paranoia, a side effect of the desolation and the encroaching darkness. Desperation guided my choices as I took turns down unfamiliar roads, the rain reducing visibility to almost nothing. The forest seemed alive with shadows that flitted just beyond the reach of my headlights. I tried to convince myself it was a trick of the mind, but the unease grew. The fuel gauge, once a distant concern, now hovered dangerously close to empty. Panic set in as I realized the isolation and the relentless rain had led me to a place where even the GPS was rendered useless. I was lost, trapped in a maze of winding roads with no signs of civilization. The whispers of doubt grew louder in my mind as I navigated the winding paths. The rain, now a torrential downpour, created an otherworldly symphony that drowned out any rational thoughts. The shadows danced on the periphery, and the figure I thought I had left behind in the rearview mirror lingered in the recesses of my memory. With each turn, the forest seemed to warp, the twisted trees taking on grotesque shapes. I felt the weight of unseen eyes, their gaze following my every move. The car's headlights flickered, casting long, distorted shadows that played tricks on my perception. The road became a twisted labyrinth, the trees forming a dense canopy overhead. The air grew thick with an otherworldly energy, and I could sense the presence of something ancient and malevolent. Dread coiled in my stomach as I pressed forward, driven by an unseen force beyond my control. As I emerged into a small clearing, the rain ceased and an eerie calm settled over the surroundings. In the center stood the figure, its skeletal form outlined against the spectral glow. Hollow eyes met mine, and a voice, a ghastly whisper, echoed through the clearing.
"You cannot escape the curse that binds this place,"
it intoned.
"You are now part of the eternal dance, condemned to wander these haunted paths until the end of time."
A sense of resignation washed over me as I realized the futility of my struggle. The forest, a realm of ancient malevolence, had claimed me as its own. The figure extended a bony hand, gesturing toward the surrounding trees that seemed to pulsate with a malevolent energy. With hesitation, I took the outstretched hand. The world blurred, and I found myself back in the car, the rain continuing its relentless assault on the roof. The GPS screen displayed a familiar road, and the Fool Gauge showed a level that defied logic after the harrowing journey through the cursed forest. As I drove, the rain eased and the oppressive darkness gradually gave way to the soft glow of dawn. The trees, no longer twisted and malevolent, lined the road like silent sentinels. The weight on my shoulders lifted and the echoes of the forest whispers faded into the recesses of my memory. The car carried me out of the forest and into the light of a new day. The GPS announced my arrival at a familiar town, and the road led me to a gas station where I refueled the car. The events of that surreal night lingered in the corners of my mind, a haunting reminder of the thin veil between the known and the unknowable. As I continued my journey, the sun rose higher in the sky, dispelling the lingering shadows. The forest, now a distant landscape in my rearview mirror, seemed to recede into the past. The whispers, the figure with hollow eyes, and the cursed labyrinth became fragments of a nightmare that I couldn't entirely forget. The road ahead stretched into the promise of a new day, but the memories lingered, leaving me forever changed by the spectral dance of that night. The nightmare had ended, but the echoes of that haunting night persisted, a chilling reminder that some experiences leave an indelible mark on the soul. The night drive gone wrong became a tale to be shared with caution, a story of a traveler who had glimpsed the edges of a realm where the ordinary and the supernatural collided. As I drove into the light of the rising sun, the weight on my chest slowly lifted. The road, now a path of redemption, carried me away from the cursed forest and toward the uncertain horizon. The nightmare had ended, but the memories lingered, leaving me forever changed by the spectral dance of that unforgettable night. The road, overgrown and barely discernible, led me deeper into the heart of the wilderness. The trees closed in, casting elongated shadows that danced with the play of moonlight. Unease settled in as I realized the GPS signal dwindled to nothing, leaving me isolated in the eerie silency. Suddenly, a flicker of headlights illuminated a clearing ahead. A group of people, cloaked in dark robes, stood in a circle around a makeshift altar adorned with candles. The air tingled with an otherworldly energy as I cautiously approached. Panic surged as I realized I had stumbled upon a clandestine gathering, a cult hidden in the depths of the woods. The cultists, absorbed in a ritualistic chant, seemed oblivious to my presence. I fumbled to reverse the car and retreat, but a sudden realization struck. The path behind me had vanished. It was as if the forest itself conspired to keep me within the circle of the cult's influence. In a moment of trepidation, I turned off the engine, hoping to evade detection. The cult's chanting intensified, and the air grew thick with an inexplicable force. My heart pounded as the cultists, their eyes fixated on the altar, raised their hands in unison. As the ritual reached its crescendo, a blinding light enveloped the clearing. Shadows danced wildly, and an indescribable sensation gripped me. The world seemed to warp, and reality itself blurred at the edges. In that surreal moment, I felt the boundaries between the tangible and the mystical dissipate. When the light faded, the cultists dispersed, leaving me alone in the clearing. The GPS signal, miraculously restored, guided me back to a recognizable road. The cult's ritual had altered the very fabric of the forest, creating a surreal detour that defied the laws of the natural world. It was past midnight, and the only companions I had were the low hum of the engine, the rhythmic patter of rain on the windshield, and the disquieting symphony of unseen creatures rustling in the undergrowth. I should have known better than to take this shortcut. The locals called it Dead Man's Curve, a name whispered with a morbid reverence that sent shivers down spines and turned even the most seasoned travelers back. But I was on a deadline, a fool's errand fueled by ambition and a misplaced sense of invincibility. The storm had been brewing for hours, a sullen behemoth gathering its strength on the horizon before unleashing its fury upon the unsuspecting earth. The rain, a gentle drizzle at first, had morphed into a relentless torrent, blurring the world into a watery canvas of swirling grays and blacks. Visibility dropped to a hair's breadth, the headlights swallowed whole by the ravenous night. My phone, my lifeline to the outside world, had succumbed to the damp hours ago, its screen a dark mirror reflecting my growing unease. The GPS, rendered useless by the lack of signal, flickered erratically, offering no guidance in this desolate wilderness. A twig snapped to my right, the sharp crack echoing through the oppressive silence. My grip tightened on the steering wheel, knuckles white against the worn leather. My heart hammered a frantic tattoo against my ribs, each beat a drumbeat to my mounting dread. Then I saw it. A flicker of movement in the periphery of my vision, a fleeting shadow dancing at the edge of the headlight's reach. I slammed on the brakes, the car skidding to a halt on the rain-slicked road. I strained my eyes, peering into the churning wall of rain, but the darkness yielded nothing. Silence descended once more, thick and suffocating. I held my breath, listening for any further sign, any hint of what I might have seen. But there was only the drumming of the rain and the unsettling creak of the straining trees. Convincing myself it was just a trick of the light, A figment of my overactive imagination, I restarted the engine. The tires whined in protest, struggling to find purchase on the wet asphalt. Inch by agonizing inch, I coaxed the car forward. But the feeling of being watched persisted, a prickling sensation at the back of my neck that refused to be ignored. Every rustle of leaves, every groan of the wind, sent a jolt of adrenaline coursing through my veins. Then I saw it again. This time there was no mistaking it. A figure, tall and gaunt, emerged from the trees, its form impossibly thin and elongated. It stood at the edge of the road, its head tilted at an unnatural angle, eyes glowing with an eerie, malevolent light. Panic clawed at my throat, choking the scream that threatened to erupt. I scrambled out of the car, my feet pounding on the rain-soaked asphalt. The forest seemed to press in on me, the trees forming a grotesque skeletal archway overhead. I ran blindly, the sound of my ragged breaths the only counterpoint to the relentless drumming of the rain. I don't know how long I ran or how far. My lungs burned, my legs screamed in protest, but I dared not stop. The chilling laughter of the figure echoed behind me, urging me on, fueling my terror. Then I saw it, a faint glimmer of light through the trees, a beacon of hope, piercing the oppressive darkness. With renewed energy, I surged forward, my legs pumping like pistons. As I burst from the trees, the sight that greeted me sent a fresh wave of terror crashing over me. A ramshackle cabin, its windows glowing with an unnatural yellow light, sat nestled in a clearing. Smoke curled from its chimney, painting grotesque shapes against the storm-racked sky. But it was the figure standing on the porch, silhouetted against the flickering light, that truly chilled me to the bone. It was no longer gaunt and skeletal, but burly and imposing, a hulking shadow wielding a wicked-looking hunting knife. He grinned, a grotesque parody of a smile that revealed a mouth full of chipped and yellow teeth.
Lost, are we?
He rasped, his voice a gravelly growl that sent shivers down my spine.
Come on in, traveler. You look like you could use some shelter.
My heart hammered against my breath hitched. Every instinct screamed at me to turn and run, but my legs were leaden weights, frozen in place by a primal fear. The figure descended the porch steps, his boots crunching on the gravel with a chilling rhythm.
Don't be shy.
He chuckled, his voice dripping with a sickening amusement.
I won't bite. Much.
He took a menacing step closer, the glint of the knife catching the light in a way that made my blood run cold. My mind raced, searching for an escape, but the dense forest loomed behind me, an even more terrifying prospect than the approaching madman. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from within the cabin, followed by a woman's muffled scream. My fear morphed into a desperate resolve. I couldn't just stand there while someone, anyone, was being attacked. With a surge of adrenaline, I lunged at the figure, tackling him to the ground. We grappled in the mud, the rain washing away any semblance of reason, leaving only the primal struggle for survival. He was surprisingly strong, his blows raining down on me with bone-jarring force. I tasted blood, metallic and warm, trickling down my lip. But I fought back, fueled by a newfound courage, the woman's screams spurring me on. My hand brushed against something hard and cold in my pocket, my car keys. With a surge of hope, I fumbled them out and jammed the key into the figure's eye. He roared in pain, releasing his grip. I scrambled to my feet, his agonized screams ringing in my ears. Without a second thought, I sprinted towards the cabin, the heavy oak door the only barrier between me and whatever horrors awaited inside. I slammed into the door, throwing my shoulder against it with all my might. It creaked open a fraction of an inch, enough for me to squeeze through. I stumbled inside, slamming the door shut behind me and throwing the heavy bolt across. The woman, young and bound, lay gagged on the floor. Her eyes widened in terror as she saw me, but there was also a flicker of hope in their depths. Ignoring the throbbing pain in my body, I knelt beside her and fumbled with the knots binding her hands. My fingers, slick with blood and rain, were clumsy, but I persevered.
Get out of here!
She rasped, her voice hoarse.
He'll be back.
But I couldn't leave her. Not after what I had seen. Besides, the figure outside was momentarily incapacitated, giving us a precious window of opportunity.
We need to get out of here together,
I whispered, finally untying the last knot. She nodded, her eyes scanning the room for an escape route. Just then, The door shuddered under the impact of a heavy blow. The figure was back. We scrambled to our feet, panic propelling us towards the back of the cabin. There, a small window, barely large enough for one person to squeeze through, offered a desperate chance of escape.
You go first.
I urged the woman, pushing her towards the window, but she wouldn't budge.
I won't leave you.
She insisted, her voice trembling with fear but resolve.
There's no time. Climb through. I'll hold him off.
She hesitated for a moment, then nodded, understanding flickering in her eyes. With a swift movement, she clambered onto the chair beneath the window and disappeared into the night. I turned just as the door splintered under another blow. The figure burst into the room, his face contorted in a mask of rage. He lunged at me, the knife flashing in the dim light. We danced a deadly ballet around the cramped cabin, the floorboards groaning under our struggle. I dodged his blows, using the furniture as shields, all the while searching for an opportunity to strike back. Finally, I saw it. A heavy iron skillet hung on the wall by the fireplace. With a desperate lunge, I grabbed it and swung it with all my might. The metal connected with a sickening thud, the figure collapsing to the floor with a groan. The knife clattered away, clattering across the uneven floorboards. I stood there, chest heaving, the weight of the skillet a grounding force in my trembling hands. The figure lay still, blood pooling around his head. For a moment, I thought it was over. But then a low moan escaped his lips. He stirred, his hand reaching out for the fallen knife. Panic surged through me again, stronger and more primal than before. This time I wouldn't hesitate. With a grim determination, I raised the skillet and brought it down once more, the final blow echoing through the silent cabin. The silence that followed was thick and suffocating. I sank to my knees, the iron skillet clattering to the floor with a hollow ring. My body ached, every muscle screaming in protest, but the adrenaline had ebbed, leaving behind a chilling emptiness. I stumbled to the window, peering out into the storm-racked night. The forest loomed like a malevolent entity, swallowing the woman into its inky depths. Had she made it? Or had she simply traded one horror for another? Tears welled in my eyes, a mixture of relief and regret. Relief at being alive, regret at the life I had taken. The line between self-defense and cold-blooded murder had blurred in the heat of the moment, leaving me stained with blood and guilt. The faint wail of approaching sirens sliced through the silence, a beacon of hope and judgment in equal measure. As the flashing lights painted the trees in an eerie dance, I knew my ordeal was far from over. The story I would tell wouldn't be one of heroism, but of desperation and survival. A tale etched in blood and rain, forever binding me to the secrets of Dead Man's Curve and the chilling memory of the night I became both victim and victor in a dance with death. The storm finally began to break as the police swarmed the cabin, the promise of dawn painting the eastern sky with streaks of hopeful gray. But even as the darkness receded, a part of me knew I would forever carry the shadows of Dead Man's Curve etched upon my soul, a grim reminder of the thin line between fear and survival, and the heavy price sometimes exacted in the name of both.